We're at Daniel chapter 7. I'm anxious about the book, about this particular chapter. It's the first place where the idea of a Messiah starts to come into full view in the Old Testament. It's the first time that we actually hear Israel looking forward to what Daniel is going to call the Son of Man. It's the term that Jesus will adopt for himself. Instead of directly calling himself the Son of God, he'll prefer to refer back to Daniel 7 and call himself the Son of Man. And you're going to see that idea arise in chapter 7. My hope is that once we're finished with it, that you'll understand it. There's not a whole lot that I can proclaim to you from it. I can't give you something you can use. I can't give you application from it. Although there's some natural responses that should happen, but I can't really give you 3 things you can do as a result of the sermon today. But what I really want is for you to get a sense of it, because I think that's the nature of a vision. Most prophets will say, well, thus saith the Lord, and they'll give you a proclamation. They'll tell you, well, this is what God says, and you're going to have to do some things. But when God gives a prophet a vision, when he gives him a revelation, it's really a word picture. And a picture is actually supposed to move you. It's supposed to have a particular effect on you. It's not didactic. It doesn't necessarily teach you in that systematic way that an epistle would. It's supposed to have an effect on you. It's supposed to hit you a certain way, leave you with a certain impression, make you feel something. It's intended to be dramatic. And we're going to encounter that in Daniel chapter 7. The chapter has some great symmetry to it. It really falls into 2 categories, 2 sections. Chapter 7, 1 through 14, is the vision Daniel sees, and then 14 through 28 is the angel Daniel approaches, telling him the meaning of the vision. Now, I could start at 1 through 14 and tell you the vision, and then we'd have to go through 14 through 28 for you to actually understand the vision. So for the sake of time, I won't take you 1 through 7, because the angel will take Daniel in 1 through 7, in 14 through 28. And it's better for you to hear what he says it means than for you to hear what I say it means anyway. That makes sense? So we're going to start at 14 and work our way through. But know this, 1 through 7 is Daniel telling the reader what dream he had. And then beginning at verse number 15, he's going to say to the reader, then I approached an angel that I saw in the vision, and I'm going to ask the angel, what does all of this mean? What is the significance? And then the angel is going to tell Daniel what the vision means. Now, I was talking to Gilbert earlier, and he was really ready for this sermon. He said, because people have written a whole lot about Daniel chapter 7. They really have. It's probably the most written about book in the Old Testament, right? But here's the first thing you've got to settle on before I start. You may have questions about what you're going to hear that the writer has no intention of answering for you. You have to settle on the fact that there's some parts of it you don't get an answer for. Now, if you try to answer more than what the angel will answer Daniel, then you're on shaky ground. You have no way of knowing that you're right. Listen, get this. Daniel's going to see a vision, and then he's going to approach an angel in the vision and say, what does all of that mean? And then the angel, it will tell him exactly what it means. So listen, how will you and I know what the vision means? All we got to do is listen to what the angel said. Now, if you still got questions beyond the angel, yeah, you're just going to have some questions. And the problem with books like Daniel is people are trying to answer questions that go beyond what the writer has revealed in the book. The passage says it's a vision. And a vision implies he sees a picture. All right? And what he is going to see are these four beasts, Daniel is going to call them. And they're going to come up out of the sea, he says, as the four winds stir up the sea. Everybody with me? And these four beasts are going to look pretty beasty, if you will. They're going to look like some things you've probably never quite seen before. But don't get caught up too much like people do in the details of the beast. Here's how I know you don't need to, because when the angel answers, the angel doesn't get caught up in the nature and what the beasts look like. All right? So it says, as for me, I'm reading at verse 15. As for me, my spirit was distressed within me, he said, and the visions in my mind kept alarming me. That's one of the first things y'all need to know. The vision that Daniel is going to get is not necessarily a vision that's going to soothe him. You know, there's so many times I've heard this preached where we try to encourage people from Daniel's vision when Daniel wasn't encouraged by the vision himself. What? If you don't believe me, watch this. Daniel tells you when he saw the vision, it alarmed him. That's verse 15. Y'all see it? If you go down to verse number 28, after the angel has explained the vision to him, he is going to say again, my thoughts were greatly alarming. You all see it? And my face grew pale. Remember I told you, a vision is supposed to have an impact on you. What was the impact that it had on Daniel? It left him alarmed at what he saw. Now listen, now this is just biblically sound. If I preach Daniel 7 and encourage you with it, and Daniel finished it with being alarmed, then what have I done with the passage? Yeah, I missed it somewhere, didn't I? And I'm going to tell you at the end, y'all remind me, I'm going to tell you at the end, because your tendency when you hear about the Son of Man in the passage, and when you hear about the great courtroom scene, your tendency is going to be encouraged. But I got to put you then back in the context so that you'll get the feeling that I think you're supposed to get. All right? So y'all already know, this is not one of those encouraging ones. Watch what happens. I'm back at verse 15. Verse 16, I'm sorry, Daniel says, I approached one of those who were standing by and began asking him the exact meaning of all of this. You see, he was specific when he asked the angel. He said, what is the significance? What is the meaning of all of this? He didn't say, I want to know what each of the beasts mean, and I want to know what the horns are about, and what does the sea represent? You know, that's all the questions they like to ask of the text, right? He said, I want to know, what does it mean? Listen, that's one of the great questions that you need to ask of the Bible. What does it mean? Instead of asking trivial questions, ask for the significance. So he says, I want to know what is the meaning of all of this. So he told me. Y'all see that? So he told me and made known to me, there's the word, the interpretation of these things. This is an aside. This is a side note, one of those teaching moments. Most people will actually assume an application is an interpretation. But an application is not an interpretation, right? The way that you start with your Bible is you first have to see what's there. That's the first part. You can't see what you want to see in it. You got to see what's in it. That's observation. You got to see it. You got to see it as it is given. And then from observation, you got to move then to interpretation. Interpretation asks and answers the question, what does this mean? Y'all hear what I said? Not what does it mean to me. That's an application. It's what does it mean? What does it mean says, what does it mean to me, you? What is the meaning that comes out of it? Not what do I get out of it. That's an application. It's what does it mean to me, or to us all. That's better. All right? So what Daniel said is the angel gave me the interpretation of it. He gave me its meaning. He gave me its significance. Now, he didn't give me the trivial details. He gave me the significance of all of it. Now, I need to give you a little bit more background so that you can put this together. When Daniel sees this vision, real quickly, in 1 through 14, Daniel sees a vision and he gets to see the details of it. The first thing he sees is the wind starts to come up. From the four corners of the earth, the wind begins to churn the sea. And then they ask questions, those meaningless questions like, what sea is it? Must have been the Mediterranean. It doesn't matter what sea it is. It churns up the sea, and out of the sea comes these four beasts. They don't all come at once. They come one at a time. The first beast that comes up out of the sea, he said, looked like a lion. It's a figure. It looked like a lion. It resembled a lion. Right? Here's one of the reasons why we know it wasn't a lion. It said it had wings like an eagle. So the beast looked like a lion with wings like an eagle. And then it says, and I kept looking until the wings were plucked up. That's plucked up out of the beast. And it says, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. A human mind also was given to it. That's the beast. And behold, another beast, here's the second one, resembling a bear, and it was raised up on one side. I'm not exactly sure what that looked like unless I had seen the vision, but somehow a side of the bear-like creature raised up, and it says, and 3 ribs were in its mouth between its teeth, and thus they said to it, arise, devour much meat. Y'all see all the details in that image? Right? And then there's a third beast. It says one like a leopard, or some of your translations may say panther, right? A leopard or a panther. And it also had 4 wings on its back, unlike the lion-like creature that had 2. This one had 4. And it says, it had the wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads. That ought to spook you a little bit. A 4-headed leopard with 4 wings. And it says, and dominion was given to it. After this I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast. And this one didn't look like anything he could actually name. He could say the one looked like a lion, and the other one sort of resembled a bear, and the other one was kind of like a leopard. But this one, it was unlike anything I could call it. It was dreadful and terrifying and extremely strong. Now, as you hear it, let me ask you, if you were to read this story to your children at night, to Sebastian, he probably won't sleep good. Am I right? The immediate impact of what he sees is frightening. And you've got to ask the question, what then is the meaning of these frightening looking beasts as they come up out of the sea? And that's where I want to make sure that y'all have that image. There's a lot of detail in there, right, that the angel is not going to address. So that if you're going to understand the book of Daniel, don't ask questions like, what were the ribs in the bear's mouth? You know, I was reading one commentary, Q, and they told me what 3 nations were the 3 ribs that was in his mouth. And I'm thinking, you know, the angel didn't waste time telling me what the ribs were. Why am I trying to figure out what the ribs are? So I'm back now over at verse number 17. Verse 16 says, so he told me, and he made known to me the interpretation of these things. These great beasts, which are 4 in number, are, he says, 4 kings who will arise from the earth. So listen, y'all get it? The lion-like animal is a king that will come up, he says, out of the earth. In the vision, they come up out of the sea, but the angel says the king is going to arise from the earth. Y'all see? He's just going to come up onto the scene. He's going to rise to the level of king in a way that takes notice on the world stage. That's what he says. There are 4 kings, but the saints of the highest one, he said, will receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom for all the ages to come. Y'all see it? That's important, because what he ends with is there will be 4 kings who come up out of the earth, and he says, but the kingdom will be given to the people of the highest one. And y'all probably get it. The highest one is probably God, right? Now, this is what becomes important. Out of those 4 beasts, Daniel pays particular attention to the last beast, and the vision gives more detail of the last beast. Right? So let me back up and give you a little bit more of that information, because Daniel is going to have a specific question to the angel concerning the 4th beast. So let me show you back on the 4th beast in verse number 7. After this, I kept looking. Everybody know where I am? Am I moving too fast? I'm at verse 7 of the vision, not the interpretation, but of the vision. He says, I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrifying, and extremely strong. And it had large iron teeth. It devoured and crushed and trampled down the remainder with its feet. And it was different from the other beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. While I was contemplating the horns, behold, another horn, a little one, came up among them, that's among the 10 horns. And it says, and 3 of the first horns were pulled out by the roots before that little horn that came up. And behold, this horn possessed eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth uttering great boasts. That's a funny looking beast, isn't it? And so when Daniel sees that much detail concerning the 4th beast, then it wasn't sufficient for Daniel to just hear the 4th beast was a king. He says, the vision suggests there's something different about this one than the other 3. So tell me a little bit more about the 4th beast. So that's what he says, verse 19. Then I desired to know the exact meaning of the 4th beast, which was different from all the others. Y'all see why Daniel would want to know about the 4th beast? And then he said, which was exceedingly dreadful, with teeth of iron and its claws of bronze, and which devoured, crushed, and trampled down the remainder with its feet. And the meaning of the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn which came up, he's just recounting, right? Which came up, and before which the 3 of them fell, namely that horn which had eyes and a mouth uttering great boast, which was larger in appearance than its associates. I kept looking, and the horn was waging war, he said, with the saints and overpowering them, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was passed in favor of the saints of the highest one, at the time, and the time arrived when the saints took possession of the kingdom. So he's asking the angel the question about that beast and what he saw that beast doing. That beast was trampling the saints. Y'all hear it? So then verse 23, thus he said, that's the angel is going to give him the meaning of what he saw. The 4th beast will be a 4th what? Say it again. Kingdom. Y'all see why it's different? The first 3 were kings, but kings have kingdoms. But the 4th one is characterized more by the kingdom than by the king. Y'all follow? He said it will be a 4th kingdom on the earth, which will be different from all the other kingdoms, and will devour the whole earth and tread it down and crush it. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings will arise. See, the other ones were historically they were characterized by their kings. Like Babylon, which by the way is that first beast, was characterized by Nebuchadnezzar. But this fourth one won't be necessarily characterized by its one greatest king. It will really be known by its kingdom. It's going to have at least 10 kings in it. Watch this. And it says, and another will arise after them. That's after the 10 kings. And he will be different from the previous ones and will subdue 3 of the 10 kings. He will speak out against the Most High and wear down the saints of the highest one. He said he will wear them down. Who's going to be worn down? And he will intend to make alterations in the times and in law, and they will be given into his hand, he says, for a time, times, and a half time. It's a time, and then times plural, and then a half of whatever a time is. Now, let me just be very, very direct with you, not coy. You're going to see later in the book of Daniel that that's 3.5 times. Are y'all following me? I think the times are years, and he's going to suggest that's about 3.5 years. This one horn or one king for 3.5 years will wear down the saints. He's going to tread them down. And then I love verse 26. But then the court will sit. Right. Y'all get the picture? They're going to say, all rise. And then when they all in the courtroom sit down, that means the judgment's going to start. It says, but then the court will sit. Now, what is the court? The court that the angel tells Daniel comes from Daniel's vision. So let me take you to the vision so you can get a picture of what Daniel saw, so that when the angel tells you, but then the court is going to sit, you'll know what he's talking about. So I'm going to go back to the vision now. And that begins at verse number 9. Now remember, 9 follows the description of the fourth beast with the 10 horns that has the little horn that comes up with the eyes and the mouth of a human that just wants to have a bunch of great boasts. He does a whole lot of talking. Now watch what happens, verse 9. Everybody at 9? I kept looking until thrones were set up. I have to have this sort of mental picture. Here are these beasts coming up out of the earth, right? Probably very frightening and terrifying to him, and he's still looking on, and then all of a sudden somebody gets to work, probably the angels. They come and they start to bring in these big chairs, these thrones. The thrones are being then set up, it says, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. Now, this is what most people call an anthropomorphism. It is God revealing himself in man-like ways in order for us to have the capacity to see him. It's literally the one advanced in days. In other words, the one who takes his seat is God, but God shows up in the appearance of an old man. All right, are y'all with me? The Ancient of Days. How do I know that, by the way? Huh?
Ancient? The word ancient?
He calls him Ancient of Days. That suggests he's old. Right? But watch what happens. And the hair of his head was like pure wool. I'm sorry, his vesture was like white snow. That's his robe. And his hair of his head was like pure wool. Y'all know God doesn't have hair, right? Y'all do know that, right? God is a spirit. He doesn't wear clothes. But when he shows up in an anthropomorphic way, so that we can comprehend that we're seeing God, he shows up in a way that suggests to us his majesty. So he shows up like a man advanced in age with a white robe and white hair. And he says he took his seat. His throne was ablaze with flames. Its wheels were a burning fire. A river of fire was flowing and coming out from before him, and thousands upon thousands were attending him, and myriads upon myriads were standing before him. And it says, and the court sat. So y'all see the courtroom that was set up in the midst of the vision? There were thrones, more than one. We only know of one who sat on it, and that was the Ancient of Days. But there was undoubtedly other seats there, because when it was finally set up, they sat. Right? They sat and the books were open. Y'all see that? The end of verse number 10. Then I kept looking because of the sound of the boastful words which the horn was speaking. I kept looking until the beast was slain. Now, y'all get this picture. You know, when you go into a courtroom, you don't just get to keep talking. You can only talk when the judge allows you to. When this courtroom was set up and they all sat down and the Ancient of Days began to judge, the horn kept running its mouth. So Daniel is watching the courtroom set up, and then he gets distracted because the horn is still going. Until finally the judge slays the horn. Y'all see it? Then I kept looking because of the sound of the boastful words which the horn was speaking. I kept looking until the beast was slain and its body was destroyed and given to the burning fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but an extension of life was granted to them for an appointed period of time. Now, that is, the other beasts are kingdoms. Those kingdoms were allowed to continue for a time, but the boastful horn, the king, the last king of the fourth kingdom, was destroyed when the court came into session. So that when the angel explains what he saw, he says they're going to be wearing down the saints for times and a half time until they sit down. Until the court is seated. My Bible says for judgment at verse number 26, but y'all see the for judgment is in italics. That means the for judgment is not actually in the original language. It just says, but the court will sit. And then his dominion, that's the horn, his dominion will be taken away, annihilated, and destroyed forever. Then the sovereignty, the dominion, and the greatness of all the kingdoms under the whole heaven will be given to the people of the saints of the highest one. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom. That's the highest one's kingdom. And all the dominions will serve and obey him. And here's the question. Who's the him? Who's the him?
Ancient of Days. Ancient of Days.
Now, I thought you would say the Ancient of Days. But watch this. If you go back to the vision, you're going to see that that's not the person in view. Let me go back to the vision so that you can piece this together. We finished at verse number 12. Rest of the beasts had their dominions taken but were allowed to survive for a time. That's the end of verse 12. Look at verse 13. I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, one, notice the like, one like a son of man was coming. Now watch it, because the Ancient of Days sat on the throne. Everyone else sat down, and as he kept looking, one who was like a son of man came on the clouds. He approached this judgment assembly on the clouds, it says. And it says, and he came up to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him, and to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom. Y'all see it? The kingdom was given to the one like a son of man who approached the Ancient of Days on the judgment seat. And it says, then all the peoples, nations, and men of every language might serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which will not pass away, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. So let me back up. Let me make sure y'all get this picture of what's just happened. The situation in life that Daniel is living in, the moment in time gives so much significance to what you've seen. Daniel is living at one of the most turbulent times in Israel's history. They have been consumed. They have been conquered. The people of God, who thought their God would always preserve them, has allowed them to be conquered. He has watched his army defeated. He has watched his brothers and sisters die in battle, be taken in chains to a foreign country, and he's watched the whole landscape of the world that he has known change from their sovereign rule of themselves with their king, who they always saw was the Son of God, is now consumed by these other great kingdoms and these great kings, and he's going, what's happening here? And then he gets this image, this vision, where God says, this is what's happening to you. What's happening to you is a part of my plan. And when Daniel sees it, he doesn't have the tendency to go, oh, God is going to reverse all of this one day when the Messiah shows up, when the king shows up. Daniel has a real understanding that, wow, we will live by conquered kingdoms for a long time. In fact, when the last kingdom shows up, just as we're on the brink of inheriting the kingdom, the saints are going to get tread upon. They're going to get worn down. It suggests there's going to be this friction that causes them to sort of, wither away. It won't be that one traumatic moment that causes you to make a decision for God. It's that constant sort of persecution. It's easy to die for God. Sometimes it's harder to live for him. To live on and on and on when life goes on and on and on, and it doesn't seem like the judgment day is going to come soon enough. And he says, and before all of that happens, then they're going to be tread upon. And the image of these beasts devouring and stamping out the people of God has left him terrified. But what he has gotten is a picture of history. Now, let me ask y'all a question. This is one of those moments where we can just be, because we're not traditional, we can be free. I can ask y'all a question and really expect y'all to give me an answer. If you're listening to it, where are we presently in this picture? Historically, where are we?
Fourth kingdom. How do we know?
How do we know? Good question. I'll get to that later. See, because Daniel knows his situation in life. Help me, Annalie. They call it there's a German phrase for it, the situation in life. They call it the Sitzenleben. Did I say that right? Sitzenleben. Leben. There it is. It's the situation in life. Daniel knows his. Daniel knows exactly where he is. He saw this vision in the reign of Belshazzar. That's still in the Babylonian Empire. Right? So Daniel is living during the reign of the first beast. Where are we? Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Now, this is where we got to really do our work here in understanding our Bible. We've got to do our work. I think we are somewhere between the 10 kings of the fourth beast and the last king. The 10 horns and the last horn. The last horn, I think, is going to arise just before the second coming of Christ. I'll tell y'all why I think that in a minute. I think we're somewhere between The rise of the fourth beast and the last king of that fourth beast. Now here's why I say that. The book of Revelation is going to enlighten us. It's going to fill out Daniel in a way for us that Daniel did not have. All right? And at the end of time, or end of this time, not time altogether, this time, this age, there's going to arise, according to John the Revelator, an Antichrist with great boast, and he is going to make a pact, John says, with the nation of Israel to allow them to resume their sacrifices at the Temple Mount. And then John the Revelator says, at the 3.5-year mark of the 7-year covenant, he's going to break that contract. And for 3.5 years, John says, he's going to persecute and torture the nations of Israel's people. Sound familiar? That sounds like the times and a half time. Y'all follow me? But undoubtedly, the fourth kingdom is Rome. The fourth kingdom is undoubtedly Rome. The first kingdom, the first beast, is undoubtedly Babylon. The second beast is undoubtedly Medo-Persian Empire, right? And led primarily by Cyrus the Great. And then the third kingdom is undoubtedly Greece, led by Alexander the Great. And then the fourth kingdom that we knew on planet Earth at the time was that tread down the whole earth. Y'all remember historically? Right? Greater, more powerful than all of the rest of them. Last longer than all of the previous kingdoms. Right? And somehow, I don't know how, the last king is going to be a Roman king. A Roman ruler of some kind. But it will be after that the judgment will come.
You're looking at tribulation period.
I think it's the tribulation period. I think that last 3.5 years is the great tribulation, because there will be tribulation, John the Revelator says, for the first 3.5 years, and the last half he's going to call the great tribulation. So why then is Daniel disturbed by it? Because that sounds like good news. That says he's going to win, or we're going to win. We will inherit the kingdom.
You're going to suffer.
Listen, it's been a long time. I mean, from the 539 BC or so, when Daniel first saw the vision, to at least the coming of the Lord Jesus Christ, it's about 500 or so years, 600 years or so. And we're another 2,000 years from there to where we are presently. And what Daniel realized was there's a whole lot of time between the suffering that began when Nebuchadnezzar came into our city and the time that our city will finally be reestablished. The kingdom will be given back to us. See, what they thought was soon we'll be established as a kingdom again, a nation again. It was prophesied that Cyrus the Great would have a great command and allow the Jews to go back to their homeland, and they thought it would be like another Exodus. We'll go back, we'll set up, our king will be sovereign again. And that never happened. They were allowed to go back, but they were still under the thumb when they went back of Persia, and eventually Greece, and then eventually Rome, and they would never be free again to be their own nation. Now, here's some of the important things that you got to get from this. The people of God have to have endurance then. It's a worldview shaping idea. Listen, is the world going to get better? Can we really expect that some human government now will fix the problems that we have and be righteous enough in their behavior to change the world? Can the United Nations fix our problems? This suggests every beast that came out of the sea was more terrifying than the last one. Every king becomes more despotic than the last one. Until finally, the last one is going to be so despotic that he is going to exalt himself even to the heights of the highest one. That's a worldview. That's a way of thinking for the people of God. It says what we are really in need of is endurance. Instead of looking for the day of Jubilee, let's settle into the reality that until our Savior comes again, we're in trouble. There will be suffering. There will be tremendous suffering by the people of God. Some self-inflicted, others inflicted by the state, but it's not going to get any better. And Daniel understood it. He understood it very well, and so when the vision was done, he was alarmed. But he also had a hope in the vision that would allow him to continue. And the hope that he had was for the day when the court would sit. And so here's the reality of the passage that it communicates to us. We've got a pretty good picture. Not all the details. We don't know when the last king will arise with some sort of Roman connection. But we do know that the fourth kingdom has already come. Right? But there will be a kingdom after the fourth kingdom. And that kingdom will be the kingdom of his son. Now, here's what we also know, according to the New Testament, because you should always preach in light of the revelation that you have. Here's what we know. When Jesus came, he said the kingdom of God is at hand. It's here. It was begun during the time of the fourth kingdom. The fifth kingdom was inaugurated at the end or the tail end of the fourth kingdom. So that when this courtroom scene actually happens, that's not at the first coming of Christ, that must be at the second. So that what you're getting a picture of here is the judgment day. Or as some Old Testament writers would call it, the day of the Lord. Or as Matthew, it says in Matthew 25, that's the time when those who endure to the end will be saved. See, that's when context matters. Some people read Matthew 25 and they hear him say, only those who endure to the end will be saved. That says your salvation is in jeopardy until you get to heaven. Yeah, they've missed their history. That says when the persecution starts, those who make it, who endure the persecution, will be saved. And not everyone is going to endure. Some of us will be trampled through. We've got so much. Now, watch this. 7 begins the apocalyptic material. It gives us an overview. Watch this. In chapter 8, some of the kingdoms that I've called Babylon and Persia, Medo-Persia and Greece, the angels in chapter 8 are going to call them by name. So beginning at 7 and then going through 8 and then 9 and 10, redemptive history is going to get more and more filled out. We're going to come to know more and more of what God's plan is for us. Here's one of the things it tells us. History has not gone wrong. It's gone exactly the way God said it would. Everything that's happened in this life has happened just as God has planned. And what we look forward to, where we are now in history, is the day that the court sits, where they call the court into session, and the judge comes in to actually give the final verdict on mankind and the kingdoms of men. Amen? Amen. We still got a lot of good stuff to cover.